Gotcha. Yes. Yes. Get into it. Get into it. Yes. We're back. Hi. You know what time it is. You know what time it is. You know what time it is. You know, no, you know, no, 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 you know, no, 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 you know what time it is. Hey. Hi, y'all. Welcome back with Storytime with Chris. As I always say, you don't have to watch videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max, relax, and chillaxing time. In between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, CP time. Anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. I don't know who talked to Arizona. First of all, I've been drinking Arizona since 7 or 8. That's the earliest I can remember picking up a can and buying it. And the price has never changed. Because the CEO was like, why would I need to increase the price? It's been working the same way it has been. And that's somebody who knows the needs of the people. But this dragon fruit mango with a beautiful illustration, which I wonder if the artist is on here. Well, it would help if I had my glasses on, but it's okay. No, I'll have to go online and see if they mention the artist who did the illustration for this can, because it is immaculate. And more so, I take that as because y'all know me, I'm a mythological buff when it comes to information like that, and I'm more so feeling that this is the Chinese equivalent of the dragon. This is not the Japanese equivalent, because the Japanese equivalent, and some cases Chinese, but mostly Japanese dragons, live under the sea, live by the sea, with the sea. Whereas Chinese dragons live in the mountains, the heavens, the clouds, and so on. They carry gems within their claws that represent their power, their wisdom, their energy. Whereas Japanese dragons live within the confines of the sea, of the ocean, and the waves, and the ancientness of the sea and ocean. Which we definitely, actually, I have my Japanese folktale book, and we could definitely read a story about the king of dragons. Ryujin would be his name. Ryujin-o. O in Japanese means king. So you could say Okami or Ryujin-o, Ashura-o. So O, the title, is put at the end of the word. That's another discussion for another day. But that is a story we can definitely read after. Ow. I hurt my hand. After we read this other story I've been wanting to read for a while, The Wild Swans. It's one of my favorite, if not top 3 favorite, I'd say top 5 favorite fairy tale of all time. Number 1, somebody's gonna kick me for this. Rumpelstiltskin is my number 1 favorite fairy tale of all time, and nobody has really adapted that story in a long time, whether in animation or live action. The only last idea I can think of doing Rumpelstiltskin was Disney's Once Upon a Time series, which they gave that character a lot of depth and a lot of coolness, and just love that show. Love that show. Anyway, love the illustration. Delicious in taste. Definitely would buy again. Which I bought 3 cans, so there's that. Let's go ahead, sit back, relax, and let's get to the story. Chapter 3, The Calling. Up in Will's attic bedroom, the air was warm and still, furry with summer heat. He lay on his back, listening to the late-night murmur and chink below as the last waking Stantons, his father and Stephen, he thought, from the rumbling voices, made ready for bed. This had been Stephen's bedroom, and Will had carefully packed up the belongings to let the rifle owner take residence again for the length of his leave. But Stephen had shaken his head. Max is away. I'll use his room. I'm a nomad now, Will. It's all yours. The last day closed, last door closed. The last glimmer of reflected light went out. Will looked at his watch. Midnight had passed. Midsummer Day was here now. A few minutes old. Half an hour's wait should be enough. He could see no star through the skylight in his slanting roof, but only a moon-washed sky. Its muted brightness filtered down into the room. The house was muffled in sleep when finally he crept down the stairs in his pajamas, gingerly treading the furthest corners of these steps that he knew would creak. Outside the door of his parents' room, he froze suddenly. His father, snoring in a gentle crescendo, half woke himself, grunted, turned, rustling over, and was lost again in soft, breathing sleep. Will smiled into the darkness. It would have been no great matter for an old one to put the household away into a pause of time, caught out of reality in a sleep that could not be broken, but he did not want that. There were likely to be enough ways tonight in which he would have to play with time. Softly down the lower staircase into the front hall he went. The picture he had gone to find hung on the wall just inside the big front door. Beside the hat rack and umbrella stand, Will had brought a small flashlight with him, but he found he did not need it. The moonlight, silvering the air through the hall windows, showed him all the familiar figures the picture held. He had been fascinated by it since he was very small, so small that he had to clamber up on the umbrella stand to peer inside the dark carved wood of the picture frame. It was a Victorian print, done all in murky shades of brown. Its great attraction was the enormous, complicated clarity of its detail. In flowing script, it was entitled The Romans at Caerleon, and it showed the construction of some complex building. Everywhere crowds of figures, tugged robes, led oxen straining on sturdy wooden yokes, guided slabs of rock into place. A paved central floor was finished smooth and elliptical, flanked by columned arches. A wall or staircase seemed to be rising beyond. Roman soldiers, splendidly uniformed, stood overseeing the bands of men unloading and tugging the neatly cut stones into place. Will looked for one soldier in particular, a centurion in the far right-hand corner of the foreground, leaning against a pillar. It was the only still figure in the whole panorama of busy construction. His face, drawn in clear detail, was grave and rather sad, and he was gazing out of the picture into the distance. That sad remoteness was the reason why Will, when small, had always found himself more intrigued by this one odd figure than by all the rest of the scurrying workers put together. It was also the reason why Merriman had chosen the man for the concealing of the signs. Merriman, Will sat down on the stairs, chin on hands. He must think hard and deep. It was simple enough to remember the way in which he and Merriman had managed the hiding of the linked circle of signs, the most powerful and vulnerable weapons of the light. Back into the time of this Roman they had gone, and there among the stones whose picture hung before him now, he, Will, had slipped the signs into a place where they could lie safe and unseen, buried by time. But to remember that was one thing, to reverse it quite another. He thought the only way is to live through all over again. I have to go again, to go once more through everything we did in hiding the signs, and then instead of stopping, I shall have to find a way to take them out again. He was beginning to be excited now. He thought, Merriman can be there, but I shall have to do it. I shall be with you, but powerless, he said, so he won't be able to show me this moment when I have to say something or do something, whatever it is. He may not even know when it comes. Only I can choose for the light. And if I fail, we can go no further forward from here. Excitement dwindled beneath the appalling, merciless weight of responsibility. There was one key, only to the spell that would release the signs, and only he could find it. But where, when, and how? As the main principles of writing, the who, where, why, when, and how. Will stood up. The way out of the spell could be found only by going back into it. So first he must reenact the casting of it, turn time, so that once more he could live through the hours. More than a year earlier, when with Will at his side, Merriman had... What had Merriman had done? It must be an exact echo. Putting down his flashlight, Will stood before the picture on the wall, remembering. He reached out and put one hand on its frame. Then he stood very still, gazing in total concentration at a group of men in the picture's middle distance, men straining at a rope that was pulling a slab of rock towards some point that could not be seen. He emptied his mind of all thought, his senses of all other sight or sound. He gazed, and very gradually, the sound of creaking rope and rhythmic shouts and the grinding of rock against rock began to grow in his ears, and he smelled dust and sweat and dung, and the figures in the picture began to move, and Will's hand was no longer in the wooden picture frame, but on the wooden side support of an ox cart laden with stone, and he stepped forward into the world of the Romans at Caerleon. A boy of that time, cool in a white linen tunic on a warm summer's day, with square stone cobbles uneven beneath his sandaled feet. Heave, 2, 3, heave, 2, 3. The stone inched forward on its rollers. In other rhythms, the same shouts rang through the air from other groups, soldiers and laborers working together, skins olive or dusty pink, hair curly black or lank blonde. Stone crashed and squealed against stone. Men and women and animals grunted with effort, and Merriman said into Will's ear from behind him, "You must be ready to slip the link when the moment comes." Looking down, Will saw the 6 signs of the light, joined by links of gold clasped around the waist of his tunic like a belt. Bright and dark they lay between the gleaming links, each of the 6 the same shape, a circle quartered by a cross, dull bronze, dark iron, blackened wood, bright gold, glintering flint, and the last that he would never forget, seeing it sometimes even in his dreams, the sign of water. Clear crystal engraved with delicate symbols and patterns like a circle of snowflakes caught in ice. "Come," Merriman said. He swept past Will, tall in a dark blue cloak that fell almost to his feet, and drew level with the pillar beyond the steaming oxen, where a centurion stood watching a team of workmen lace straps and ropes around the topmost slab of granite on the wagon. Will followed, trying to be inconspicuous. "The work goes well?" Merriman said. The Roman turned his head, and Will saw that it was the same somber figure whose image he had passed almost every day of his life. Bright dark eyes regarded Merriman from a lean, long-nosed face. "Excuse me." "Ah," the man said. "It is the Druid." Merriman inclined his head in a kind of mock formal greeting. "Many things to many men," he said, smiling slightly. The soldier looked at him reflectively. "A strange land," he said. "Barbarians and magicians, dirt and poetry. A strange land, yours." And he snapped, suddenly taut. Part of his attention had been on the ox cart. "Careful there, you fools! The rope at the end!" Men scrambled to balance the descending slab, which had tipped perilously to one side. It came down in safety, and the man in command of the team saluted, calling his thanks. The centurion nodded and relaxed, and though still watching them, another wagon rumbled past, laden with long beams of wood. Merriman looked at the rising structure before them. The wider view now showed that it was a half-built amphitheater, stone wall with tiers of wood-topped seats rising in a curving great sweep from the central arena. "Rome has many talents," he said. "We have some skill with stone here, and none can match our great stone circles with their homage to the light. But the skill of Roman builders for the daily life of men, as well as for worship, your villas and viaducts, your pipes and streets and baths. You are transforming our cities, friend, as you have been transforming the pattern of our lives." The shoulder shrugged. "The empire grows always." He glanced at Will, who hovered at Merriman's side, watching the team of men swinging the long stone slowly to one side down from the wagon. "Your boy?" "He learns a little of what I know," Merriman said coolly. "I have had him a year now. We shall see. He has the old blood in him from the years before your fathers came." "No fathers of mine," the centurion said. "I am not empire-born. I came from Rome 7 years back, commissioned into the second, a long time ago. Rome is the empire is Rome, and yet... He smiled suddenly at Will, a kind smile lightening the severe face. "You work hard for your master, boy." "I try, sir," Will said. He enjoyed following the formal pattering of the Latin. It came without effort to an old one, as did any language of the world, but brought somehow a particular pleasure because of the echoes of it in his own native tongue. "The building interests you?" "Marvelous it is, the way each piece of stone is cut to fit exactly to the next, or to hold a beam of wood, and the putting them together so carefully, precisely. They know just what they are doing." It is all planned just as anywhere in the Empire. This same amphitheater has been built on a score of legionary fort towns like this one, from Sparta to Brindism. Come, I will show you. I would just say this. The Roman Empire was one of, not the, one of the biggest empires in the world. When I tell you that the city of Rome itself was so busy at night, they had to put up certain hours where you couldn't do labor at certain points of the evening. So there was certain times where you could not roll carts through the streets. There were certain hours where you couldn't be carousing in certain sections of the city. So basically, this is how it went. So let me... What can I... Actually, this would be a perfect usage of example. Okay. So, actually, we'll do it this way. So, this is... Okay, put my hand behind the product. Yes, okay. There we go. Okay, so the topmost color is where all the rich people of Rome live, right? Everybody down here lives in the fields, okay? Everybody over here is at the edge of the city. Everybody over here is living in houses at the edge of the walls of the city. Everybody here is in downtown area. Everybody here is in the midst of downtown. Everybody here is a bit further into the center of the city, but towards the heights, so where the palaces and temples are. So basically, the reason why I say that is because Rome, as the famous saying goes, Rome was not built in a day. Rome comes from the name of Romulus and Remus, two twin brothers who were raised by a wolf and were able to come together to build of Rome and build an incredible empire. Rome is not excused without its problems, though, because unfortunately Rome, factually true, had the largest slave trade in the world. Didn't matter, black, white, young, tall, short. If you could be, you either were bought for your services or sold into slavery or had to work out of service to pay off a debt or to pay off disrespecting a higher official. And Rome was indeed and still is a huge city. Obviously, those things have changed. Just as this story in this particular scene right now is set at least thousands of years ago prior to our current time. And, well, at least I'd say 1,000. That's some change. So about 1100, 1200 AD, I would say. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But the beauty of that city is how it was structured. Everything is pretty much a tiered section. So what does that mean? It means that the more money you have, the higher you are above others. The more money you have, the more likely you're not listening to the chaos of downtown traffic, of merchants trading goods and noises of the bars and all of that. You don't have to deal with that. Now, you have one of two options if you're not rich back then. If you were poor, or at least slightly well off, you could live outside of the city, but then you have to deal with the wilderness and the elements and not being able to get goods right down the street. Those are things you take into account. You till your own land. You take care of your own animals. You could be attacked by forest creatures, wolves, bears, and such and the like. But these are things that happened. I'm well versed in Roman history, but I was more so a fan of Greek history. More so for Alexander the Great, who is one of my favorite figures within history for a lot of different reasons. But, yeah. The more you know. Let's get back to the story. And here's some, as I look down, there's going to be a bit of a history lesson in this. Let's do it. Okay. He took Will by the shoulder with a beckoning glance at Merriman and led him across the sandy central floor of the arena to a half-finished vaulted arch, one of 8 entrances through the rising tiers of seats. When my third team brings up that next slab, it will fit here, so, and lock in place there. Column of stone slabs were beginning to rise at the side of the arch. Will peered at the next as it drew close to its rollers, tugged by 4 sweating soldiers. A grunting, straining team hoisted it into place in the rising arch. It was much more larger than the rest, irregular with a large hollow depression in the top, but with one broad, unusually flat surface for the front side. Will saw the incised letters Co. XC Flav Julian, built by the 10th cohort, the century of Flavius Julianus, like Caesar Augustus, or Nero, or actually that does work. Titus Andronicus. Shout out to Shakespeare. Titus Andronicus. That's a really good play. It's a very early Shakespeare play, and it is. We'll talk about it another time. It's a great play. Excellent. And silently, in the old one's manner of speaking into the mind, he said to Will, "In there, now." At the same moment he stumbled, knocking clumsily against the centurion's elbow. The Roman turned courteously to catch him. "Is anything wrong?" Swiftly, Will slipped the belt of link signs from his waist and dropped into the hollow irregularity in the slab's top side, over which the next slab of stone would be placed. He pushed earth and stones hastily over it to keep the gleaming metals from view. "I beg your pardon," Merriman was saying. "Foolish. My sandal." The soldier turned back. The team came straining up. Will moved quickly aside, and the stone slab groaned and squeaked into place, and the circle of signs was shut into a coffin of stone to lie hidden for as long as this work of the Roman Empire should survive. The detached part of Will's mind, aware of everything as a spell-brought echo of things he and Merriman had done before, came jolting now into his consciousness. Now, it said, what next? For this was as far as those first actions had gone. After this point, on the day of the hiding of the signs, he had very soon found himself back in his own century, flipped forward in time with the precious circle hidden safe behind them. So the secret that he must now urgently find, the precious key to their recovery, must lie somewhere in these next moments of Roman time. What could it be? He looked desperately at Merriman. The dark eyes over the high curved nose held no expression. This was not Merriman's task, but his own. He must do it alone. All the same, there might be a reason why Merriman was there. For this half of the spell as for the other. Even unwittingly, he might have some part to play. It was for Will to discover that part, if it were so, and take hold of whatever might be there for him to take. Where, when, and how? The centurion shouted commands, and his nearest team of workers swung round and marched back for the next stone. Watching them, the Roman shivered subtly and drew his cloak tighter around his shoulders. "Britain-born, all of them," he said. "Britain-born, all of them," he said wryly to Merriman. "Like you, they have find no horror in this climate." Merriman made a formless murmuring sound of sympathy, and for no reason that he could imagine, Will found the small hairs rising on the back of his neck, as if in a warning from some sense that had no other speech. He stood tense, waiting. "These islands," the Roman said, "green, I grant you. Well might they be green, always the clouds, the mist, and rain. Ah, my bones ache." So this is a group of Roman soldiers who are coming over to Britannia, or Brittany in this case, in the early days before it was Great Britain, coming over to basically colonize against the Anglo-Saxons and the Celts and Druids and Gaelic folk and Scottish folk and whatnot, and Welsh folk, to bring about their ideas into the scheme of things. Merriman said softly, "And not the bones only. It must be hard for one born in the sun." The centurion stared out over the wooden seats and stone columns, looked at nothing, and shook his head helplessly. Will said in a small, clear voice that seemed to him to belong to someone else, "What is it like, your home?" "Rome? A great city, but my home is outside the city and in the countryside. Quiet life, but good." He glanced at Will. "I have a son who must now be as tall as you. When I last saw him, I could throw him in the air and catch him in my hands. Now my wife tells me he has learned to ride like a centaur and swim like a fish, swimming now, perhaps, in the river near my land. I wanted him to grow up there as I did, when the sun hot on the skin and the air shrill with cicadas and the line of cypress trees dark against the sky, the hills silver with olive trees and terraced for the vines, with the grapes filling out now. The homesickness was a throbbing ache, like physical pain, and suddenly Will knew that the answer was here in the air, and in the moment of simple, unprotected longing, with a man's deepest, simplest emotions open and unguarded for strangers to hear and see, this was the road that would carry him. Here, now, this way. He let his mind fall into the longing, into the other's pain, as if he were diving into a sea, and like water closing over his head, the emotion took him in. The world spun about him, stone and gray sky and green fields whirling and changing and falling down to place, not quite the same as before, and the yearning, homesick voice was soft in his ears again. But the voice was a different voice. The voice was a different voice, and the language was changed into a soft-accented English with long slanting vowels, and it was evening now with a moon-washed silver-dark sky above and the shadows all around, shapes and shadows, indistinguishable one from the next. But in the new voice, the ache of longing was exactly the same. It's all sun and sand and sea, that part of Florida, my part. Flowers everywhere. Oleander and hibiscus and poinsettia and big wild bushes, not shut up in skinny little Christmas pots. And down on the beach, the wind blows, and the coconut palms and the leaves make a little rattling noise like a shower of rain. I used to swing in those leaves when I was your age, like swinging on a rope. If I were down there now, I'd be out fishing with my dad. It's got a 40-foot Bertram, a beauty, called Betsy Girl after Mom. Out through the channel in the mangroves you go, dark green like forest in the water. The water's green too till you get way out in the Gulf, and then it's a deep, deep blue. Beautiful. And you swing the outriggers on with the lines over and bally-ho on, and you'll catch bonita or dolphin, or if you're lucky, pompano. The tourists all want sailfish or kingfish. Day before I left home, I got a 60-pound king. Guinea, that's my girl. She took a picture of it. Will could see him outlined against the sky, bright and dark by turns now as gathering clouds crossed the moon, a lean young man with long hair caught back in a stubby ponytail. The soft, remembering voice went on. Haven't seen Guinea for 8 months. Man, that's a long time. I've got our first day all planned out for when I get home. Keep thinking about it. Long, lazy day in the sun, swimming, lying on the beach, surfing maybe, and beer and hamburgers at Pete's. His burgers are just out of this world. Big and juicy on a homemade bun with this special sour pickle relish. Guinea loves them. She's so pretty. Long blonde hair, great figure. She writes me every day. Didn't come over because her old man's got a weak heart and she felt, she's just a great girl. He paused and slowly shook his head. Hey, I'm sorry. You really got me going. I guess I didn't know how much I'd been missing people. It's been fun here on the dig, but I'll sure be glad to get home. Behind him, a rounded grassy slope rose as skyline, yet although this seemed totally strange, Will had the conviction that somehow he was in the same place as before. Perhaps it was only that linking emotion, the ache in the American's voice, and yet Merriman's voice said in the dim night, cheerful, breaking the mood, he seems to have pressed a button, asking you about home. Have you been here a long time? It'll be a year by the time I'm through. Not so long, really, I guess. The young man became self-consciously brisk. Well, hey, let's show you. I wish this wasn't such a quick visit, Professor. There's so much you could see better in the morning. Well, Merriman said vaguely, I have appointments. Over here, you said. Just a minute, I'll get a lamp. Better than a flashlight. The American vanished into a box-like structure that seemed to be a small wooden shed. A light flared in a window, and then he was back again with a hissing hurricane lamp unexpectedly held aloft, casting a bright pool around them, in which Will could see grass at their feet and Wellington boots on Merriman's trousered legs. Beyond, poles and ropes and small drooping marker flags jutted from an excavation made into the grassy mound that he had thought a natural slope, as if a giant slice had been cut from an earthen cake. At the inside of the excavation, where it cut furthest into the mound, he could see stones. He could see a stone-paved floor like a stretch of square cobbles, the scattered stones of a fallen arch, rising tiers of stones where once wooden benches had stood on. The whirl of emotions cleared from Will's mind, and instead wonder and relief, delight flooded into him like a spring tide, and he knew, looking at the stone, that the secret releasing the signs from their enchantment had been caught at the proper moment indeed. You know the background, of course, Professor Lyon, the young American said. Always the mound was known as King Arthur's Round Table, with absolutely no justification, of course, and no one could get permission to dig, or funds for that matter. Until this Ford Foundation deal, and now that we finally get it inside it, what do we find inside King Arthur's so-called Round Table but a Roman amphitheater? You'll find a mytharium, too, before you're done, I shouldn't wonder, Merriman said in a strange, brisk, professional voice Will had not heard before. Caerleon was a major fort, after all built for keeping down the barbaric British in their mists and fogs. The American laughed. I don't really mind the mists and fogs. It's the rain and all that mud afterwards. They sure knew how to work with stone, those old empire builders. Look, here's this inscribed slab I was telling you about. Centurion Flavius Julianus and his boys. The lamp hissed. The shadows danced. He led them to a shoulder-high column of great slabs of rock. Will saw the highest, the largest, with its inscribed letters battered now by age. It was newly excavated. An inch of earth still lay over it, where the stone above had slipped to one side. Merriman took a small flashlight from his pocket and shone it, quite unnecessarily, Will thought, on the inscribed block of stone. Very neat, he said fussily. Very neat. Here, Will, my boy, have a look. He handed Will the light. We think there were 8 entrances, the American said, all vaulted with some kind of stonework. This must have been one of the 2 main ones. We only started clearing it this afternoon. Excellent, Merriman said. Now just show me that other inscription you mentioned, would you? They moved away to one side of the cave like Dick to take the pool of the yellow lamplight with them. Will stood still. He snapped on the light for a second to be sure of his step, then he turned it off. Putting his hand forward in the darkness of what he knew now was his own time, midsummer day, a matter of seconds after he had first left it, he reached scrambling into the earth that had lain since the decay of Rome's empire some 16 centuries before, in the hollow of the big rock of the broken arch, and his fingers met a circle of metal quartered by a cross, and putting down the flashlight to scramble with both hands in the earth, he drew out the linked circle of the signs. Very carefully, he shook off the dirt with the circles and their gold links spread wide to keep the metal from rattling. He glanced up. Merriman and the young archaeologist were no more than a glimmer of light, yards away against the excavation. Excitement tight in his throat. Will clipped the belt-like chain of signs around his waist, tugging his sweater down to cover them. He went forward to the lamplight. Ah, well, Merriman said blandly, time we were going, I'm afraid. It's very exciting, Will said, bright and enthusiastic. I'm so glad you stopped by. The young American led them to a car parked behind a fence. It's been a privilege to meet you, Dr. Lyon. I only wish the others had been here. Sir Mortimer will be real sorry. In a flurry of farewells, he handed them into the car, pumping Merriman's arm in a kind of hearty reverence. Will said, You made Florida lovely. I hope you see it soon. But archaeology had driven his early emotion quite out of the young American's mind. Nodding, smiling vaguely, he disappeared. Merriman drove slowly down the road. He said, his voice changed utterly, You have them? I have them safe, Will said, and a strong hand clenched his shoulder briefly, hard, and was gone. They were no longer master and boy, nor ever would be again. They were old ones only, caught out of time in a task both were long destined to fulfill. It must be tonight, and quickly, Will said. Here, do you think now? I think so. The times are linked by our presence and by the place. Above all, by your good work, I think so. Merriman stopped and turned the car and drove back towards the excavation. They got out and stood in silence for a moment. Then they were together into the darkness, skirting the cleared arc and walls, climbed to the top of the grassy mound. There they stood, under a sky dark now with scuddling clouds that hid the moon, and Will took from his waist the linked belt of crossed circles that was the symbol of the circle of the light and held it up in both hands, and time and space merged as the 20th and 4th centuries became, for a midsummer's instant, 2 halves of a single breath. Boom, boom. And in a clear, soft voice, Will said into the night, Old ones, it is time, now and for always, for the second time and the last. Let the circle be joined. Old ones, it is time for the dark. The dark is rising. His voice ran strong. He held the signs high, and a glimmer of starlight flashed on the circle of crystal like white fire. And all at once they were no longer alone in the silent grassy mound. From all over the world, from every point of time, the shadowy forms of men and women from every kind and generation crowded there in the night. A great glimmering throng was gathered. The old ones of the earth come together for the first time since 6 seasons earlier. The signs had in their presence been ceremonially joined. The darkness rustled. There was a formless murmuring in the place, a communication without speech. Merriman and Will stood there together on the hill in the night full of beings and waited for one last old one whose presence would weld this great gathering into an ultimate instrument of power, a force to vanquish the dark. They waited and the night grew brighter with starlight, but she did not come. The glimmering forms murmured and rippled as though the land blurred, and Will's consciousness, at one with the minds of all his fellows there, was filled with unease. Merriman said low and husky, "I was afraid of this." "The lady," Will said helplessly. "Where is the lady?" "The lady?" Indistinct as the wind, a long whisper ran through the darkness. "Where is the lady? Where is the lady? Where is the lady?" Will said softly to Merriman, "She came at the turn of the year before last, for the joining. Why does she not come now?" Merriman said, "I think she has not the strength. Her power is worn by resisting the dark. You and I know well how she has spent herself in the past, and though she managed the effort for the joining of the signs, you remember then she had no strength even to take her leave." "Yes," Will said, remembering a small, fragile, old figure, delicate as a wren, standing beside him overlooking a great throng of old ones as Merriman stood now. "She simply faded. And then she was gone." "And it seems that she is gone still, out of reach, gone until a helping magic may come from the sum of the centuries of this spell-ridden island to bring her to our aid. For the first time, for the only time, the help of mere creatures is needed for the lady." Merriman drew himself up, a tall, shadowy, hooded figure in the night, dark as a pillar against the sky. He spoke without effort or great force. His voice filled the night and seemed to echo to and fro over the unseen heads of the enormous throng. "Who knows?" he said. "Who can tell? Oh, all you circle of the old ones, who can tell?" One voice came out of the night, a deep, beautiful Welsh voice, rich and smooth as velvet, speaking with a rhythm that gave it the lilt of singing. You know what? I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this sentence because it is in Welsh, and I am not a master of Welsh. And we just read a story that was heavily featuring Welsh, which I want to learn the language, but I'm just going to skip it. Well, maybe I'll try. Vermeant ver minvrend Yinkanu, ach vien mer argelvedas, vien dod. Ach vien mer argelvedis yin dod, which means, being translated, the mountains are singing and the lady comes, which that was probably a terrible pronunciation, and I apologize to my Welsh friends. I'm going to do better. I am going to learn. I truly will, considering I've now read a 5-book series of Welsh mythology, a novel in this series featuring Welsh mythology, and then actually I did read a Christmas story featuring a Welsh character. There was a great stir among the airy crowd, and before he could help himself, Will let out a cry of joyful recognition at the words. "The verse, of course! The old verse from the sea!" He sombered subtly. "But what does it mean? We all know that line, Merriman, but what does it mean?" The question echoed in many voices, whispering and susurrating, like the sea when a small breeze rises. The deep Welsh voice said reflectively, "When the mountains are singing, the lady will come. And remember one thing, it is not in the old speech, which we all use. Those words have come down to us, but in a younger language that is nevertheless one of the most ancient used by men." Merriman said softly, "Thank you, David, my friend." Welsh, Will said. Wales. He stared into the blank, dark space where clouds once more were drifting over the moon. He said hesitantly, his mind feeling for the right word, the right idea. I'm going to go to Wales, to that part where I've been once before, and there I must find the moment, the right way, somewhere in the mountains, somehow, and the lady will come. And he shall be complete and singly bound, Merriman said, and the end of all this questing will begin. Palm Hivid, Will Stanton said, the rich Welsh voice gently in the darkness. Palm Hivid, good luck. Palm Hivid, good luck. And it faded and died into the soft whine of the wind, and all the gathering around them faded too, vanishing away to leave them standing, two lone figures there in the darkening night on the grass-smooth mound in the midsummer day of the time into which Will had been born. Will said, but for the first time to which I was called, the rising of the dark and in the time of Arthur, we are allowed only a night and a day to bring help there, and I cannot keep to that limit now. So what of the great king in the battle that is to come at Badon? What will... He stopped himself, cutting off words that belonged not to old ones, but to men. Merriman said, completing it, what will happen there? What will happen? What has happened? What is happening? A battle won for a little while, a respite gained, but not for long. You can see, Will. Things are as they are and will be in Arthur's time. We have to help us, for they have been gathered and much can therefore be accomplished. But without words from the lady, the last height of power cannot be reached, and so the peace of Arthur that we shall gain for this island and Badon will be lost before long. And for a time the world will seem to vanish beneath the shadow of the dark, and emerge and vanish again, and again emerge, as it has done through all the length of what men call their history. Will said, until the lady comes. Until the lady comes, Merriman said, and she will help you to finding of the sword of the Pendragon, the crystal sword by which the final magic of the light shall be achieved, and the dark put at last to flight. And there will be 5 to help you, for from the beginning it was known that 6 altogether, and 6 only must accomplish this long matter. 6 creatures more or less of the earth, aided by the 6 sides. And who do you think those other members will be, if you've been paying attention? We got Will, we've got Bran, and then we got 3 other characters. I want you to guess who they are. Will said, quoting, when the dark comes rising, 6 shall turn it back. Aye, Merriman said. Suddenly he sounded very weary. 6 for a heart turning. One impulse, Will quoted again. A whole verse this time from the old prophetic rhyme that had come gradually to light a world ago, it seemed to him, with the growing of his own power as an old one. When the dark comes rising, 6 shall turn it back. 3 from the circle, 3 from the track, wood, bronze, iron, water, fire, stone. 5 shall return, 1 will go alone. He spoke the last line more slowly, as if he were hearing it for the first time. Merriman, that last part, what does it mean? It has never put anything into my mind but a question. 5 shall return and 1 go alone? Who? Merriman stood there in the quiet night, his face obscured by shadow. His voice was quiet too and without expression. Nothing is certain, old one, even in the prophecies. They can mean one thing or they can mean another. For after all, men have minds of their own and can determine their actions for good or ill will, for going outward or turning in. I cannot tell who the one may be. None shall know until the last, until the one goes alone. He gathered himself and stood straighter, as if pulling them back out of a dream. There's a long road to tread before that will come, and a hard one if we are to triumph at the end of it. I go back now to my Lord Arthur with the signs and the power of the circle which only they can call. He held out his hand, barely visible in the star-washed darkness, and Will gave him the linked belt of crossed circles, gold and crystal and stone, glittering between dark wood, bronze, iron. Go well, Merriman, he said quietly. Go well, Will Stanton. Merriman said, his voice tight with strain. Into your own time. At this midsummer hour, where affairs will take you in the direction you must go, We will strive at our separate tasks across the centuries through the waves of time, touching and parting, parting and touching in the pool that whirls forever, and I shall be with you before long. He raised an arm, and he was gone, and the stars spun, and the night whirled about, and Will was standing moonlit in the hall of his home, his hand on the frame of a Sepian Victorian print that showed the Romans building an amphitheater at Caerleon. And that is where we will end for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you for your patience. I'm telling you, this is a reason why I love this series. It's a reason why it's my favorite fantasy, one of my favorites, I should say, fantasy series from my youth. And it's just amazing. It's just amazing to see the brilliance of somebody so young being able to do so many cool things. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Ah, the sea.